Hey everyone. It's March 31st. It's the last day of March. It is 1 p.m. in Mountain Standard Time, which is where I live in Montana. And it's time for another reading from my book, Watching Porn. This is a book that I wrote about the adult entertainment industry. I happen to know a lot about the adult entertainment industry because I've spent over 10 years as a reviewer, critic, interviewer, general journalist about town, writing particularly about pornography. It started randomly when I took a job as a DVD reviewer because I needed a job, and that is the first thing that popped up. And I got really interested in the subject matter. Back in those days when I started, it was 2007-ish, nobody talked about porn. It was a huge industry. It was actually, I think, much more profitable than it is now. But nobody talked about it. It was like a very, very hush-hush subject. And I was like, well, this is crazy. Everybody is watching this stuff, and we need to talk about it more because it definitely isn't something that you just watch and then walk away from without being impacted by it. I feel like everybody who's watching this is actually taking something away from it. And if we're not talking about what is being taken away, we really kind of risk not being honest with ourselves about the media that we're taking in and what's happening to us because of it. So I started writing about it a lot in a variety of different ways. And then by the time that I had a one-person art exhibition in Tribeca in 2012 about pornography, I kind of had made a little bit of a name for myself as, like, you know, the porn journalist person. And I met a publisher at the launch, what do you call it? The opening party for my art show, who wanted me to write this book. So this book is called a memoir because it's about my experiences, but it's actually an informative book about the adult entertainment industry for people who don't really know much about it, but who are curious. I think it's actually important that more of us know more about the adult entertainment industry. So that's why I wrote this. Today I'm going to read a chapter about race issues in the adult entertainment industry. So it's going to be kind of heavy subject matter, not as fun as some of the other chapters in the book are, but this is a really important topic, so we need to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to read this chapter. But I'm not going to read right away because, as always, it takes a little while for people to trickle in, and I don't want to be too far along too quickly. So instead, I'm going to talk about some other things. So, hey everybody. I hope you're having a lovely day. I'm having a weird day. I woke up this morning and went to feed my neighbor's cat because the neighbor is away for the weekend and I'm feeding the cat. So went in, fed the cat, we hung out for a little while, and then when I was getting ready to leave, I gave the cat some treats, as I always do before I leave, and the cat puked all over the kitchen floor, like everywhere, all over the place, like just kept puking. So that was fun, and that happened before I had had any caffeine or anything. So that was a good time. Let's see. Then I had some tea, which was too strong, so then I felt like I was going to puke, but I already kind of felt like I was going to puke because I'd been watching a cat puke and cleaning up cat puke all morning. So good times. Then my cat came next door and attacked the other cat because we were out in the yard together, and my cat got jealous. So then that cat got mad at me and was hissing at me and didn't want me back in her house. So that's been fun. It's been a day. It's only 1 in the afternoon and I feel like I've already lived a whole day's experience. Hi JL. Thank you for being here in my time of need. Okay, so that's little news, and I probably shouldn't have led with that. It's just what's on my mind because it was not a fun way to start my day. You know, I feel like for a lot of people out there who have like children and multiple pets, it's probably not that big of a deal. Like, they wouldn't even flinch if that happened to them. But I have one cat who doesn't puke very often, and I don't have any kids, and there's a reason for that. I don't really like dealing with that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's a big deal for me. Anyway, I shouldn't have led with that detail because I am trying to make an announcement that is very exciting to me, and something that I haven't talked about a whole lot on social media yet, because I kind of want to be able to really dig into this subject when it's time. But I also feel like anybody who tunes into this live stream deserves to get a sneak peek at something that is like a hugely big deal for me. So I want to let you guys know, you folks, I'm trying to get away from using the word guys as like an all gender thing, because I know that for lots of people it doesn't work gender wise. It's definitely really deep in like the lizard part of my brain that guys works for every gender, so it's an uphill battle, and I am trying to replace guys with folks. That's my goal, but I am not succeeding at it all the time. I need like one of those like rubber bands around my wrist where like every time I say guys, meaning all genders, I can like snap myself. Maybe I'll start doing that. It's a good idea. Okay, let's try this again. Drum roll. All right. Folks, I am really, 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 really excited to tell you that tomorrow, which is going to be April 1st, 2019, will be the launch of my second book. This is my first book. This is a memoir that was published by the Overlook Press in 2017. And my second book is Tracy Queen. This is a graphic novel that I have been working on for about 7 years. It's only the first volume of the graphic novel. There are eventually going to be 8 of these 60-page graphic novels, which will then be collected into a 300-page graphic novel. And this is the first volume of that amazing story. And it is going to be released tomorrow on April 1st. And I am super freaking excited for a lot of reasons, because I published this myself. It's kind of complicated. So I am the editor and the publisher at Oneshi Press, which is a small indie publisher that I co-founded with my partner, J.L. Draco. And together, we are publishing this as Oneshi Press. So I wrote this book. J.L. Draco did the illustrations. Lynsey, do the announcement again at the end, please. I will. Okay, so this is the first 36 pages of Tracy Queen's story. There's also, okay, now I'm all derailed because I read chat. Damn. Let's try this again. This book was written by me. It was illustrated by J.L. Draco. Let me show you some of these awesome illustrations in here. The cover art was done by Stevie Ray Drawn, and it is gorgeous. And I wish that I had slightly different lighting in here. This is getting a little glary, but I'm trying to show you the cover art by Stevie Ray Drawn. Continues on the back. And it has guest art in it from not 1, not 2, not 3, but 10 guest artists did fan art of Tracy Queen. We've got 10 of those in here. I'm not going to show them all to you, because if I showed them all to you, it would be unfair, because it's not actually out yet. Oh, hi Tracy. It's awesome that you're here. Anybody who wants to can click on Tracy's little, what do you call it, avatar, and get a closer look at the high resolution art. Okay. There's also a thank you page to the nearly 200 people who made this happen by backing it on Kickstarter. This is the result of a successful $9,500 Kickstarter that we got nearly 200 people to help us out with. It is gorgeous, and it is one of the most exciting things that has ever happened to me in my entire life. I am a porn journalist by trade. Oh, Rosetta says, the cover art is great as well as all the art. Thank you. Yes, JL has been working on the art for this since, I guess, probably 2012. That's when I started really in earnest working on this, and he started doing concept art around the same time. So, yeah, this has been 7 years in the making. We have a lot of the art for the second volume done, but it's not completely finished yet. And I mean, this is just the start. This is going to be a massive graphic novel, and I'm so psyched that not only is it going to be out in the world tomorrow, but that it looks this good. So here's the thing. I am a journalist primarily by trade. That was not on purpose. I've never really particularly gravitated toward journalism. I'm not a super, I don't know, I'm not like a super fact-driven person. That sounds weird, but I'm more of an emotionally driven person. Like, when I read a book, I may remember some of the plot details and some of the facts, but mostly what I remember is like the emotional takeaway, like how deeply did these characters or these events affect me. So journalism has never been my calling per se, but it is something that I kind of ended up doing, and I'm okay at enough to like do journalism, but I've always wanted to write fiction. That's always been my big goal. As such, I have almost completely avoided writing fiction because I'm terrified of failing at it, as I'm sure some of you can sympathize with and understand. However, this book, Tracy Queen, actually just kind of materialized for me as a way to write fiction that didn't feel quite as all-consuming as a novel. And it started out really as me envisioning this character who was a total badass and like fighter warrior type, but who also was a sex worker. And it was based on a person that I knew who had multiple parts of their life wrapped up in the same things that Tracy Queen does. And then it kind of became embroiled in my thoughts and feelings on the adult entertainment industry, which is what I had been writing about for the past like 5 years at that point. And so this character just developed into this amazing person who I have so much respect for, and is super, super complicated and multifaceted and goes through many stages of this journey where she starts out. I'll show you a little bit of the inside because I can't help myself. Tracy starts out as like a very troubled 20-something who lives alone and is super isolated. These are the first 2 pages of the book where she is having a really bad day. She got dumped and she lives this very lonely life where she's sort of like she's kept as an enforcer for an organized crime syndicate. And that's the life that she's known. She's been extremely sheltered in a weird way, but she also lives this life of like extreme violence. And she just like doesn't know how to human. So then she meets this raccoon who is doing drugs in her warehouse, and they get to talking because he's a talking raccoon, because that's his thing, and they end up being really good friends, like right off the bat. They're like, you know what, let's hang out. So they go hang out. They're hanging out in her living room, they're drinking some wine, they're talking, they get to be really good friends. The raccoon starts to dig into her life a little bit and realizes that she is miserable. And he's like, well, hey, like, why don't you just not work for this crime syndicate anymore? Why don't you, like, make your own life? And she's like, what? Like, that never occurred to me. So she strikes out on her own. And it doesn't go as well as she had hoped. She feels, like, super excited about it at first. And then realizes, like, she doesn't have any way to make money. She had been, like, living on kind of an allowance, more or less. And suddenly she's totally out of money. She doesn't know what to do. And the raccoon, whose name is Nicola, is like, well, why don't you webcam? Like, you're attractive, and she, you know, likes sex, and he's like, it could be a way to make some money for a while. So she gives it a try, and she loves it. She's like, this is amazing. I get to be myself. I get to do what I want. I get to educate people about, like, sexuality, which is kind of her thing. She's kind of like a science nerd, so she loves telling people about that kind of stuff. and I get to make money at it. So this is like perfect for me. So that's sort of the arc of the first story, but we also get these flashes forward to this battlefield scene. This is actually the first page of the book, with beautiful, beautiful artwork. I love these pages. And we don't really know exactly what's going on, but we do, over the course of the first issue, get the understanding that Tracy is facing off with an army of, like, robots, perhaps they look like? And on the other side is this army of porn stars. And we don't quite know what is happening or how it got to be that way, but we're gonna learn more as time goes on. So that's the first issue of Tracy Queen. I just told you way more than I meant to, but I'm really excited about this. Because Tracy Queen, the full graphic novel... Hey, Lenny. Hello. The full graphic novel became much more of, like, my personal opus on a whole bunch of topics. Not only pornography and feminism and sex positivity, but a lot of other things are wrapped up in there, like animal welfare, you know, humanism, kind of what it means to be human. And so it's the first novel that I've written. I mean, it's a graphic novel, so it's not like the great American novel, maybe, if that is a thing. But I'm really, really, really excited about it. So it's going to be available for sale starting tomorrow. Rosetta says, I'm going to lurk, but I hope you have an awesome stream. Thank you so much for stopping by, Rosetta. That's awesome. It's always good to see you here. So, yeah, this goes on sale tomorrow. It'll be available at oneshipress.com in our store. And I'm terrified that nobody will like it or that nobody will even read it, because it's a huge labor of love, and I've put a huge amount of work into it, and that's only scratching the surface of all the work that's been done by JL, the illustrator, and Cardinal Ray, the letterer, and Stevie Ray Drawn, the cover artist, and all of the guest artists, like, and all of the people who were involved in the Kickstarter in making it happen. I am terrified that people are not going to be as psyched about it as I am, because here's the thing about graphic novels that I learned. They are a lot of work for everybody involved, particularly the art makers, and this is just the first of 8 issues. So if this one doesn't go well, I'm gonna have to try to convince a whole bunch more people to keep working on something that is a lot of work with, like, I just hope that it's worth it. I hope that it becomes worth it for lots of people to be involved again and again until the whole thing is done. Yeah, I don't want to show everybody all the guest art, JL, but maybe a little bit. Let me find a page that'll be easy to see. Guest art by Shaden and XCat. Lovely, right? It's so good. Like, there's so much good stuff in here. Oh, that's just one page. I thought that was 2 pages. Yeah. And then sexy guest art by Kale McDonald and Pink Pitcher. And this one, so that's Tracy Queen. She's being all dommy. And this is Patience, who is the star of Pack, which is a comic book series that Oneshi Press is publishing, which I also wrote, and JL also did the illustrations for. Okay, I'm literally showing you everything, and I just said that I wouldn't, so I'm gonna not show you all the other pages. But yeah, so tomorrow is the big launch day for Tracy Queen. The rest of the day today, I am doing launch preparation. I'm writing blog posts and newsletters and all kinds of things, and hoping that we can get some momentum for Tracy Queen. So that is, I guess, it for now. JL, would you be willing to link to the Oneshi Press store in chat, so that people can find it if they come across this video later on? Because as of tomorrow morning, you will be able to purchase Volume 1 of Tracy Queen on the Oneshi Press store. So a link to that would be really helpful. Okay, whew. I'm gonna take a drink of water. And now I was gonna say drum roll again, but I realized I literally just said that for the Tracy Queen thing, so it feels kind of dumb if I do it again. So anyway, now we're gonna get into watching porn. So when I started doing these live streamed readings of watching porn, I had this idea in my head that I was going to be super on top of it, and before each reading I would like go through the chapter and I'd cut out parts that didn't necessarily need to be in there, and I would like be all prepared and would have read it already so that I wouldn't trip over my words while I'm reading. But that doesn't happen. It did a few times, but it doesn't happen anymore, so I apologize in advance. I'm gonna trip over my words a bunch, and I guess this chapter isn't super long, but it's longer than some of the others that I have read, so I'm gonna just dive in. If you get bored, I'm sorry. I don't think that you will if you are into, you know, issues of race and equality, because that's what this chapter is about. But some people can't maybe hang. That's cool too, I guess. This is important though, so I hope that you'll be interested. So, here we go. This is chapter 14. There's an image of me and Joanna Angel, who is the founder and CEO of Burning Angel Pictures, which is a very influential porn company that actually started just a year or two, I think, before I did in the industry. Joanna Angel is a badass. She is a woman who built a company up from nothing and continues to be one of the biggest players in the porn industry after well over 10 years, and is super smart, a badass businesswoman, and well, you'll see, I think I know why they put her picture at the beginning of this chapter. You'll probably pick up on it too. So, anyway. Chapter 14, Racism in the Industry. Alright, I'll give you a little bit of background as we go. If you're just joining us for the first time, there's going to be some stuff in here that you don't get. So, when the WAC staff went back to Exotica, New Jersey in November of 2010, we saw familiar faces, went to parties, and interviewed plenty of porn stars. Note number 1, WAC Magazine is the magazine that I was the editor of. It was an online trade publication, more or less for the adult industry. We did interviews and reviews and op-eds and whatnot. And that ran from like 2009 to 2013, something like that. And Exotica, New Jersey is an adult industry conference slash trade show slash convention. Exotica is like a traveling convention. They have multiple conventions that go around the US, and there is one in Edison, New Jersey that's been there for years. This is our second time going to Exotica in New Jersey. The most memorable part of the weekend, for me, was sitting at a bar one night talking with a friend I'd made the previous year. We'll call him Seth. While the after-party raged around us, Seth and I drank whiskey gingers and talked about the industry he had been working in for nearly 20 years. At that time, Seth had performed in around 1,500 adult films, pseudonymously starred in numerous showcase series from several production companies, directed over 200 films, won 5 AVN awards, and been inducted into the AVN, XRCO, and Night Moves Halls of Fame. Yet, near the close of 2010, he told me that he was contemplating retiring from adult entertainment because he felt undervalued. Sure, 5 AVN awards sounds impressive, but when I checked them out, I discovered that every scene for which he had won an award had been a group scene, which is to say that he hadn't yet been recognized by the industry's most prestigious award-giving organization for his own performances. I encouraged him in whatever pursuit he chose, and assured him that he had so much to offer that if the porn industry wasn't giving him the respect he deserved, someone else would. But he was already in his early 50s, and although he had held jobs prior to porn, he felt he was approaching old dogs, new tricks territory. But his frustration over lack of appreciation, it seemed, was only part of what was bothering him. He suspected that he was having a hard time collecting on the legend status he so richly deserved because of his race. Oh, I just found a typo. Shit. I just found a typo in my own book. Oh, that is so frustrating. There's a semicolon followed by a capital H. It should be a period followed by a capital H, or a semicolon followed by a lowercase h. I'm not happy about this. Anyway, I'll take a moment here to recognize the fact that I have no idea what Seth's financial background looked like or what series of events led up to our conversation. But no matter what the details behind the scarcity of financial rewards for his long and distinguished career in adult entertainment, I saw in Seth's laments a microcosm of a larger trend that cannot be ignored. Earlier that day at the convention, we had both seen large, expensive booths representing major studios owned by white men. Many of those men had started out as performers, then moved behind the camera before going on to much profit and acclaim. But Seth and I had seen 0 similar booths owned by black men, or by black women, or by Latin or Indian or East Asian men or women. You get the idea. While there had been a good number of actors of color signing autographs, we were both aware that the percentages were off. Racism in pornography is an extremely tricky subject, as is racism at large. Porn's race issues go just as deep as they do anywhere else in American society, but pornography boasts a combination pressure release valve and complication on the subject. In most forms of entertainment, and in society as a whole, racial differences are more commonly downplayed in favor of politically correct cover-ups for the very deep prejudices that still exist. But in mainstream porn, those differences are gleefully and unapologetically put on display. Porn is one place where politically correct depictions of race are tossed out the window in favor of blatant stereotypes that are believed to help sell content. In a move that was both naive and cynical, I had double thought the flagrant displays of prejudice I had seen in porn in a winking parody of racism. Wait, hang on. This is a complicated sentence and I should have shortened it in the editing process. In a move that was both naive and cynical, I had double thought the flagrant displays of prejudice I'd seen in porn into a winking parody of racism in our culture. I gave it the same kind of acknowledgement I had given to Jay Vegas's brutal satirical rips on porn stars. This smirking utilization of race is self-aware, I thought. It must be. It's a critique. Proof that the industry understands how fucked up the stereotype it recreates really is. Gangbanging thugs, sexually predatory mandingos, hugely endowed bulls, promiscuous women putting out for cash, grossly overdone accents. The porn world was filled to bursting with every ready-made label the dominant culture has tailored for black people. A quick look at one African-American actor's list of credits is a veritable goldmine of groan-worthy names that turn blackness into a fetish. Big black dicks in little white slits. Black cock addiction. Fear of a black penis. Jungle beaver. The people behind these titles seem to be in on the joke and to be profiting from it, so I guessed everybody was winning, right? Well, I wasn't all wrong. Certainly, the porn industry is not so backward that it unanimously and seriously believes black men are single-minded monsters who go around despoiling white women and cuckolding their melanin-deficient husbands. The industry as a whole has a dark, for lack of a better word, sense of humor, and has long been a hotbed of satirical takes on modern life. The very existence of porn parodies speaks volumes about the genre's ability to take the piss out of our culture. I refer you to 2008's best-selling Who's Nailin' Palin?, in which Lisa Ann portrayed Sarah Palin with the panache that rocketed her to the top of the industry and mainstream fame. She remained so popular that, after a few years of retirement, she made a triumphant return to the porn industry in early 2008 with an exclusive, highly paid contract with Evil Angel. And yet, for all the laughs in its treatment of performers of color, And yet, for all the laughs its treatment of performers of color may generate behind the scenes, the industry continues to hire black men to play race-related roles. Furthermore, once performers sign their model releases and leave the set, they have no control over the editing and marketing of their work. Thus, even the most progressive of actors may end up in a film like, quote, and I'm sorry I'm about to say this aloud, Big Black Beef Stretches Little Pink Meat, number 7. And they often do, much to their dismay. Compounding this already gross circumstance is the fact that so much modern porn is consumed via free tube sites on which material is often clipped from longer movies, stripped of all content, and relabeled with even more derogatory terminology than the original product. Although I have had far fewer conversations about the race situation in the gay industry, which is to say, I don't in fact know any black men who work primarily in the gay industry, I have heard similar things from secondhand sources. Black men in gay porn are often cast as hypermasculine, physically dominant, sexually predatory thugs in interracial scenes, in which they almost always do the penetrating. Jarrett Neal, in his essay on the subject of interracial gay porn in Best Sex Writing of the Year 2015, wrote that in gay porn he's familiar with, black actors, quote, had no choice but to be marketed in a way that confined them to essential and often stereotypical characterizations of black masculinity. I don't know if you guys can hear this or not, but I can. My next-door neighbor has a very big truck with a very big engine in it. This is very exciting to my neighbor, so much so that he regularly goes out into his yard, turns the truck engine on, and then just lets it idle for a while. I don't know why. I don't know what he's doing. But it's really loud and really annoying, and he just fired it up. And I'm really hoping that he's actually planning on going somewhere in it. But that doesn't actually happen very often. Most of the time he just, like, revs the engine and just chills. Anyway, I hope you can't hear it. I can. It's annoying me. Because I'm a grumpy old man. Anyway, back to serious stuff. Given the industry's reductive treatment of black men, and with the market brimming with titles like Fat-Ass Ebony Freaks, it's not difficult to imagine the kind of climate that African American women face in porn. While a 2013 study of porn demographics revealed that 14% of female porn stars were black, a pretty accurate reflection of the American race demographic, the number of those women who work regularly and prominently in mainstream porn is tiny. Naomi Banks, a friend of Whack magazine from our very first convention, was very vocal about the situation in an interview with me in 2012. In the mainstream industry, she told me, quote, "It can only be 3 of us at a time. There are so many more beautiful black women out there that are performers that do not get their due." There was not enough, quote, ethnic work to keep more than 3 popular black performers in circulation, she believed. All black porn is treated as a specialty market, relegated to its own category on websites and filmed by specific companies. The line that producers and directors feed media inquiries and call-outs is that the public just doesn't want to see much African American porn. It doesn't make sense to make more of it since nobody would buy it. But this is a chicken and egg question that plagues most entertainment industries. Are people just not buying it because it doesn't exist? Maggie Mayhem, a white performer who left mainstream porn to work with indie companies because she was tired of watching people being demeaned, wrote on her website, Meet the Mayhems, quote, "A lot of things are brushed off with people saying, 'I'm not racist, it just doesn't sell.' I think this has something to do with the fact that people who are white own the content and market it. The industry is essentially what sex looks like from the gaze of a cisgender, heterosexual, white male, and those who are the most successful in the mainstream industry are those who create content through that same lens." Rubbing salt more deeply into the wound is the fact that black actors of all genders are paid less than their white counterparts. Performer Casey Calvert, a white model who has studied pay rates in the industry, revealed to me that if she were to shoot a standard blowbang featuring random dudes, as opposed to top-tier performers, if I do that with all white guys, those random dudes are making $400 for that scene. If I do it with black guys, they're making maybe $150, $200. In 2007, female African American models were making half to 3/4 the rates of their white counterparts, and in a 2013 interview, actor Misty Stone reported that even after she had raised her rates to allow for her massive popularity, she was still making around $300 less per scene than white models with similar levels of name recognition. I'm going to take a break to have some water. Oh, hey, he turned his engine off. I don't know if you guys could hear the difference, but I can. Like, I'm sure that it's some sort of maintenance thing that he just has to, like, turn the engine on every now and then, or maybe he's, like, fixing it up or something. I don't know. I don't like that guy. I don't think I've ever had a next-door neighbor that oh, wait. No, actually, my next-door neighbors on the other side are awesome. So, no, it's just that guy. I don't like that guy. It should come as no surprise that racism doesn't apply only to African American porn performers. There may be a starker delineation between the treatment of blacks and whites in porn, but that isn't to say that adult entertainment is kind to actors of other races either. At the end of 2012, Joanna Angel released behind-the-scenes photos from the set of The Walking Dead, a hardcore parody, which her company, Burning Angel, was producing. The work done by makeup artist Melissa Makeup was on display in these photos, and for good reason. She had transformed attractive young porn actors into rotting zombies from the hit show The Walking Dead. She had also, the photos revealed, turned white actor Danny Wilde into the Asian American character Glenn by painting his face yellow, putting him in a wig and baseball cap, and pulling his eyes taut with tape. Asian American performer Kelly Shabari called Joanna Angel to task on Twitter in a very public way, and Korean American magazine Koream published an article on the questionable choice. Feminist website Jezebel picked up the story, broadcasting the issue to millions of readers, and soon there was a full-blown internet frenzy over the issue, with porn insiders and critics taking sides. Danny Wilde, the actor in question, first offered a shrugging pseudo-apology, but later recanted on his blog. Quote, "I have spent 7 years working on a job on which it is okay to be kind of racist," he wrote. "In fact, being overtly racist has proved for some to be quite lucrative. As a society, we have tolerated racism within pornography to an incredible extent." Oh, wait, I'm missing some chat. What does it say? Lenny says, "Are people just not buying it because it doesn't exist?" Whoa. Yeah, right? Like, I don't understand how that all works, how, like, people at the top of all these entertainment industries are like, "Oh, well, that doesn't sell." And it's like, well, have you tried making it and selling it? If you haven't, then you can't say that. I don't understand. All right, anyway, back to Danny Wilde. And Danny was just one of many who pointed out that, while the yellow-face debacle was cringeworthy, it wasn't the worst of what was going on in porn. In an article for AVN, Peter Warren wrote, quote, "If critics had done the briefest Google search, they'd have come up with so many exponentially more demeaning depictions of Asians in porn. It would have made this look downright noble. Just have a glimpse at some of the titles that have graced adult retail shelves in the past few months." And again, I apologize for these. These are real titles, people. "Shrimp Fried Pussy" from Wicked Pictures. "Dim Sum Pussy" from Voyeur Media. "Yellow Fever" from Exquisite Multimedia. The list goes on. I hadn't taken in any of the above jewels myself, but I had witnessed my share of porn in which Asian-descended women used over-the-top accents as they gave out happy-ending massages with their kimonos hanging open. Almost every Asian-specific adult film in history has relied on stereotypes that simply would not fly in any other form of entertainment. Oh, hey, the engine started back up, guys! Woo! But other entertainment is not exempt. American culture still labors under the notion that men of Asian descent are less sexually desirable than those of any other race. A Columbia University study published in 2007 found that non-Asian women were 35% less likely to respond positively to Asian men than men of other races. This may be due in large part to the fact that Asian men are commonly, if not constantly, portrayed in media as nerdy, shy, faltering, and patently unsexy. As any queer pornographer will gladly tell you, representation in sexual media matters. And as for Asian men, that representation is rarely positive, if it exists at all. Of course, none of the above is sufficient explanation or excuse for employing yellowface in the Walking Dead parody. And neither is the almost unbelievable truth that, as Peter Warren pointed out in his article, there was at that time exactly one feature film level, straight, cisgender, heterosexual male Asian porn star in the American industry. One. His name was Keni Styles, and his mere existence on the adult playing field was so unprecedented that he had become a porn sensation. Keni Styles' good looks, his muscular body and masculine demeanor, his sexy British accent because he was born in Thailand but grew up mostly in the UK, and his chemistry with women made him the subject of intense scrutiny, as well as the longing of thousands of female fans, myself included. And while there were a few other Asian males in and around the porn industry at the time that the yellowface debacle went down, none had succeeded to the same degree as Mr. Styles. He was really the only guy in the industry at the time who might have been considered to step in the role of Glenn. It's likely that Keni wasn't available to shoot the Walking Dead parody. It's also possible that he was getting sick of called for every single movie that was looking for an Asian actor. And it's entirely possible that, had he been available and willing, Burning Angel may not have been able to afford his rate. Scarcity equals a higher price point in every industry, and porn is no exception. There are far more female Asian porn models, cisgender and trans, in America than there are men. Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm going to just take that whole sentence again. I know I can do this. I wrote it. There are far more female Asian porn models, cisgender or trans, in America than there are men, which is, of course, not a very high hurdle to clear. But as of a 2013 study of 10,000 porn stars, the percentage of female American porn performers of Asian descent, 5.2, was slightly higher than the percentage of Americans of Asian heritage nationally, 4.7 in the 2010 census. Which means that the porn industry's representation of Asian women isn't too far off, at least numerically. As a matter of fact, some of the top names in adult film are Asian women. Asa Akira, Kehlani Lei, Venus Lux, and others are all big names in the industry, and there are many other women of Asian descent working in porn at varying levels of fame. But the ways in which most of these women are asked to portray themselves, and by extension their race, is, to say the least, disturbing. The stereotype of submissive, sexually timid Asian females is overtly employed in these films, a titillating prospect for consumers who enjoy the idea of having their way with a sex partner who's both exotic and willing to go along with whatever they want. In a recent search for Asian titles on GameLink.com, I came upon the titles, and again, I apologize, Peking Pussy, Sichuan Snatch, and Chocolate-Covered Fortune Cookies. You guessed it, the men here are black. It's a double indictment of the American imagination that so many Asian porn titles center around food. The cuisine-centric titling reveals that Americans are largely ignorant of Asian cultures, except for the food. And that also, we're more than willing to place racially different bodies on the same level as cuisine, which is to say, available for our consumption. Sadly, but perhaps unsurprisingly, Asian women aren't the only group to be reduced to objects by way of their names. As legendary performer Cinnamon Love wrote in the Feminist Porn book, quote, "Black and Latina women in porn are very often given the names of food, cars, inanimate objects, countries, and spices. Chocolate, champagne, mocha, Mercedes, toy, Persia, Africa, India, and yes, cinnamon." For reasons that aren't clear to me, there is a markedly smaller amount of Latin American-focused porn on the American market. Whereas the percentage of most minorities in pornography closely mirrors the overall percentage of those minorities within the general population, Latino performers make up a far smaller proportion of the whole. In the 2010 census, 16.3% of Americans reported as Hispanic and Latino. But in John Millward's 2013 study of 10,000 porn stars, only 9.3% were Latinx. Perhaps the predominantly Catholic demographic is less likely to pursue pornography for religious reasons, but that reasoning feels flimsy to me, since other cultures don't particularly favor pornography as career choices either. Or maybe it's simply that Latin actors in porn are lumped in more easily with white actors. Missy Martinez, for instance, is a popular actress whose name and complexion hint at her Mexican heritage, but she is rarely cast specifically as Latina. The healthy Brazilian porn market may also play into America's paucity of Latin American content. Many American companies shoot in Brazil, where laws are lax and the local talent is lush. A lot of bareback bisexual and trans content is filmed there, with lucrative results for American producers who can hire performers at lower rates on site, then charge a premium for niche content. Niche? Whatever. Content. Featuring exotic foreign nationals. That's not to say that American-made Latino content doesn't exist, however, or that it is bucking the trend by being particularly flattering. Latin models are often cast as housekeepers and nannies on the one hand, or as landscapers, pool boys, or cholos on the other. And recent titles like Sancho's Horny Hina's No. 5, Made in Mexico, and Madre Make Me Fuck Her Man turn the stomach and indicate a disregard for cultural sensitivity, all in one go. Lenny says, I struggle with niche too. I always want to say niche. I feel like probably in college that's how I was taught that it's said, but it doesn't fit well into a sentence in, American English. Niche works better, but then I always trip myself up because I'm like, wait, is that right? Aw, JL. Oh, God. Okay, reading all of these, horribly racist titles is I'm certain that if I have enemies out there in the world, they will find this video and just take, the clips of me saying these horrible things and, broadcast them to the world. And that is how I will never become president. I actually had this realization today, guys. I mean, folks. Damn it. There I go again. Sorry. Okay, folks, I just had this realization today. I have now been old enough to run for president for over a year. So I'm way behind on my plan. But if anyone out there wants to become my campaign manager, now's your time. DM me. Anyway, when my boyfriend and I, the only WAC staffers to make it to Vegas in 2011, attended our first and to date only AVN Awards show, I steeled myself for uneven representation of race in the industry. But I was still amazed by the 4-hour parade of white people, with occasional brown folks thrown in for very deliberate feeling flavor. Both of the hosts were white. The trophy girls who handed out the statuettes, 2 golden figurines embracing atop an AVN emblazoned base, were white. The Performer of the Year and Best Actor and Actress awards were handed out to white performers on stage. But the entire section of awards for ethnic releases, which was further broken down into categories of Asian, Black, and Latin, were not even presented during the awards ceremony. I found this appalling. I recognize the fact that if every single AVN award were to be presented during... oh my god. Okay, hang on. Let's go back a second. I recognize the fact that if every single AVN award were to be presented on stage during the ceremony, the event would stretch from a 4-hour spectacle into a day-long marathon that would bore attendees to tears. However, the fact that out of the major awards presented that night, only 3 were given for films or scenes that highlighted the work of non-white actors is telling, as is the fact that there were separate categories for each type of ethnic release. Granted, these awards provided more opportunities for pornographers of color to win awards, but that night they felt like consolation prizes. The Best Interracial Release is the only award given during the ceremony that rewards the work of the Black actors, but because interracial in the porn industry refers only to a Black man with a lighter-skinned woman, usually white, the field of play for porn performers of color on the AVN stage was still extremely limited. Lynsey Lenny 2020, frick yeah! Yeah, let's do it. Let's quit our jobs, raise millions of dollars, and run for president. Although, technically, I'm gonna say that Lenny should definitely be the president, and I should definitely be the vice president, because I hate interacting with people. So, Lenny, I nominate you. Okay, interracial porn. Now, this is a whole thing. I may try to find, like, a paragraph or 2 to cut from this section, because it's very technical, weirdly enough. We'll see. Interracial porn, one of the longest-standing, most popular categories of adult entertainment, is its own bizarre world of tired stereotypes, racially motivated fantasies, and outdated economy. Interracial pairings were once at the top of the tall ladder of sex acts that white female performers were encouraged to climb as their careers progressed. As one of the most taboo acts one could perform on camera, it came with one of the highest payouts. The old ladder has been falling apart in recent years, yet it's still common for a white female model to hold out on having sex with Black men on camera for longer than she waits to have anal sex or group sex. John Millward's 2013 study showed that only 53% of white female performers were willing to do interracial scenes. For comparison's sake, 87% were willing to take facial cum shots, and 62% did anal. This, by the way, confuses me from a logistical standpoint. Whereas there is absolutely nothing making sex with a Black man unpleasant so long as you're both into each other, anal sex can be quite uncomfortable if it's not undertaken properly. Performer Courtney Combs told me of her first ever anal scene with the extremely well-endowed Peter North. Quote, "It hurt like hell. Don't let anyone tell you different. Your first anal experience is not pleasant." Unquote. And let's not forget the 5 enemas Madison Young reminded us of back in Chapter 5. So why on earth would anal be lower on the scale of first-time acts than interracial? It's bizarre. That means it's racist. To add another level of weirdness to the mix, when an actress decides to take the leap into interracial scenes, she can often charge hundreds or even thousands more for it. Some studios, I was informed by agent T. Reele, will offer up to $5,000 for a first interracial scene, then prohibit the female star from doing any interracial work for a period of time at their discretion, so that they can capitalize on the breaking of this still profitable taboo. Now, that information that I got, maybe it might have been 3 years ago. So maybe that's changed, but it would have to be a pretty quick and pretty drastic change for that to be, like, markedly different than when I got that information. It's so common for agents to tell their clients to hold out on doing interracial, or even to avoid it entirely because it might, quote, damage their careers, that when I asked the prince of queer porn, James Darling, who his heroes in adult entertainment were, he told me, "Any performer who risks their job to say no to racist and transphobic agents is my hero." The adult industry is surprisingly very conservative, and it's hard to stick to your politics and convictions when your job is on the line. I've heard similar sentiments from other performers, sometimes from the other side, those who were talked into towing the racist line until they realized what they were doing. An argument that pops up against critiques of racism in porn, aside from the standard, "Oh, come on, it's just porn," is that the adult industry isn't any more whitewashed than its wealthy cousin Hollywood. This is true. The AVN Awards I attended in 2011 were more diverse than that year's Oscars field by a long shot. But that doesn't change the fact that while Hollywood has a big role to play in perpetuating racial stereotypes, pornography actively recreates, markets, and plays those stereotypes for laughs, all while creating an environment in which white models can literally refuse to work with black ones. The discrimination here is blatant and unapologetic. As Lexington Steele, one of the most successful male porn stars in history, told The Root in 2013, "Quite honestly, adult media is the only major business that allows for the practice of exclusion based upon race." It boggles the mind to think that interracial sex could be considered taboo enough to earn itself a higher pay rate in the 21st century, but the truth is that people who want to see interracial sex are still willing to pay for it, and to ask for it specifically, by name. And in porn, naming is massively important. Performer Casey Calvert and I spoke about the thorny issue of naming when it comes to interracial porn in 2016. Interracial as a genre is a purely American construct based on our country's history. A white girl with a black man is a genuine fetish for many people, especially in the South, she told me. It's taboo, it's wrong, it's dirty. And I shoot it, because I don't want to discriminate against anyone's arousal pattern. If that's what they like, that's what they like. Yes, that sometimes includes derogatory words, but 1, all fetishes have their keywords, and 2, how many scenes have I shot where I was being called derogatory names? Too many to count. I think real racism is awful, just like real incest and real rape, but interracial porn is just as much a fantasy as those other genres. And it's a fantasy that sells. So it's a fantasy that gets turned into porn again and again. Mass market production companies make the porn that they say consumers want. Consumers develop viewing habits and a search language based on what is offered and available, Natasha Leonard wrote in The Nation in 2016. The feedback loop produces what we have come to see as natural desires. The conservative business model, as performer Mickey Maud describes it, gives the lie to the suggestion that offensive labels perpetuated in mainstream porn could be somehow subversive, turning political correctness on its head to liberate our innate desires. These desires may not be as natural as we've been led to believe, but it's pragmatic to categorize people based on their physical characteristics or sexual proclivities, even if it's backward. And as a consumer, it feels less scary to click on the BBW interracial anal link on your favorite site than to go to Google, type in porn, and hit the I'm feeling lucky button. For those who are motivated by fantasies involving racial difference, the interracial category provides what they're looking for without fear of getting the wrong content. "I haven't done the research," said T. Reele, "but apparently there are a lot of white guys that have that fantasy. And the interracial category makes it easier for them to find, and hopefully pay for their porn, which keeps the wheels of the industry spinning so that the actors who made it can get paid for their work. Except some of those actors are getting paid less than their colleagues, because of their race." Oh, hello, Adrian! Howdy! I feel like I'm doing this on my phone. I feel like I'm out of, focus. Am I out of focus, or is it just me having bad eyesight? I can't tell. Adrian says, "Not sure if I missed the live stream or not." You did not miss the live stream. I am almost done with this chapter reading, and then I have other stuff to talk about. So you are still here in time, Adrian, and I am glad to see you. Hello. We're talking about very serious issues today. We're talking about race issues in pornography, and why that's important to talk about. Instead of being like, oh, it's just porn, whatever. I think it's actually a big deal. So I wrote a whole chapter about it. And that's what I'm reading. Adrian's like, oh, this is live. Ha 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 ha. That's my Adrian impression. Oh, this is live. Ha 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 ha. That's exactly how he sounds when he talks and laughs. I'm usually at work on Sundays, so I always miss these. Oh, well, thank you for tuning in. And I hope it means that you have the day off, because days off are fantastic. All right, diving back in. It's important to note that the porn industry isn't unaware of its spotty record regarding performers of color. The industry has begun to take stock of the situation and to make changes. There are numerous award ceremonies besides the AVNs, XBiz, XARCO, and others, that work hard to celebrate the contributions of pornographers of color. There we go. Adrian says, also, thank you for writing this chapter. This is one of the myriad topics that doesn't get discussed enough. Oh, thank you. I know. I'm so good at impressions. I sound just like Adrian when I put my mind to it. Okay, so in 2016, the Adult Performers Advocacy Committee, APAC, released a statement on the matter of racial prejudice in the industry. Although it is common practice to vary scene rates on performers' experience and scene content, it is APAC's position that paying a performer less based on his or her race or charging a higher rate to work with performers of another race is unfair and unethical, they wrote. Treating a performer's race as a determining factor for pay is a violation of performer rights as well as a violation of federal workplace discrimination laws. And I'm happy to report that AVN no longer gives out awards specifically for each ethnic group, as it did in 2011. Though I'm glad to see that performers are being somewhat less pigeonholed by their racial designation, the change is a double-edged sword. It also reduces the number of awards available specifically to people of color. AVN also took the month of November 2016 to focus on the contributions of Black male performers in the industry, conducting interviews with a number of recognized names in the industry. My dear friend Shawn Michaels was one of those profiled, and I was thrilled to see that after nearly 30 years in the industry, he had plans to release a book about his experiences. Yet, as I sat at the bar in New Jersey with Seth and knocked back another whiskey ginger, this was back in 2010, I took in his kind eyes and his snappy suit and vest combo, and wondered how many times I'd seen his performances on one of the clip sites I frequented, just as disembodied big black cock, as they put it. That's actually like a kind of a genre on a lot of sites, the BBC. Classy, right? Anyway, I wondered how many times I'd seen his performances on one of the clip sites I frequented, just a disembodied big black cock pirated from a movie with an embarrassingly outdated, racially charged title. The chances were very good that I had seen that part of him that had made him legendary many times, but possibly not recognized him because his face had not been shown. And I pondered how someone with his experience, intelligence, and charm could be struggling to get by when he had brought so much to the industry he chose and worked so hard for. In trying times like these, surely pornography could stand to hear a few new ideas from some untapped minds, but I doubted any of the top brass were going to be tapping Seth for his thoughts on how to move forward anytime soon. And recent small steps toward progress notwithstanding, the fact remains that white actors are still routinely paid more than others. Meanwhile, movies with titles and scenes that portray black men as defilers and black women as oversexed urban derelicts still get made. Since Keni Styles retired from porn, there has been no influx of Asian male talent rushing in to fill the void. The porn industry, in short, continues to play into centuries of overlooking, devaluing, and commodifying bodies of color. Performer-turned-agent T. Reele told me that he tries not to let his personal feelings on racism in the industry affect his judgment as a business person. He directed me to always, as they say, follow the money, to understand where the discrimination comes from. The trail led us back to the presiding power structure in porn, which looks remarkably like most other power structures in America. That is to say, old, white, and male. These men are business people who don't have much time or interest to devote to social justice in the films they produce. They're happy to keep making the same content that has proven lucrative in the past, content that perpetuates what their life experiences have told them people want to see. And their experiences are usually those of older white men who have spent most of their careers surrounded by other white men. When it comes to racial diversity, the results are depressingly predictable. In the feminist porn book, performer Cinnamon Love writes, quote, "One of the biggest mistakes mainstream pornographers make is thinking their market is not interested in any other images of black women except those outrageously stereotyped ones. A lack of market research allows directors and producers to remain uninformed and to cater only to their own sexual likes and dislikes." In an interview I conducted with him in 2012, my friend Mr. Marcus and I sat down in his office at his brand new production studio in Van Nuys and talked about how he hoped to make his company viable. But it was an uphill climb, he told me. Quote, "There's not a lot of black men that run their own businesses in this industry. Producers want the biggest black dick because they can make movies around it. But in the executive offices, they're not dealing with blacks at a business level. When they go to a meeting, they're sitting around a table with a bunch of white guys. They think, okay, let's make another black movie. What do we know about black people? We know they have big dicks." When thinking of the people you're employing as body parts rather than humans with brains, making the decision to pay people less for equal work becomes all too easy. Reele broke down the economic picture of a contemporary porn film. Usually there's a company owner or a corporate owner. They're giving a budget to a director and saying, "Go make me a movie," or "make me a bunch of scenes." Directors often get paid by keeping whatever is left over after the production costs have been divvied up among cast, crew, and incidentals. So, said Reele, if that director has $10,000 or $20,000 in his pocket, or usually less nowadays, they're going to try to save a dollar anywhere they can. It's economics. If they know an ethnic model, whether it be Latin, Black, Asian, is not going to have as many opportunities to shoot, they feel as if they can cut down on that scene rate. If I know the average rate for a boy-girl scene is $1,000, and I need 4 Latin girls for this project, and there are 13 Latin girls fighting to be in this project, I can probably throw some numbers around and just get the cheapest girl. But economic theories about where these outdated prejudices come from can only go so far when it comes to practice. With women of color making an estimated 50 to 75% of what their white colleagues earn per scene, performer Nikki Darling had some choice words for those in control of the purse strings. Even if you're talking about the economics of it all, you're economically disenfranchising people within the industry because of their race, and in my opinion, that is morally and ethically fucked up, she said. People can make excuses and allow it to happen all they want, but when you get down to the ethics of it, that's disgusting. It's worth noting here that adult entertainment, as a legal, legitimate industry, has only really existed since the late 80s. Most of the people who made porn before that time were literally outlaws. Hang on, I'm going to skip a little bit because it's not really super, important. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so basically what we're talking about is how, in the late 80s, when porn was legalized, the people who've been working in the industry before then were, literally criminals. They were going to jail all the time. They were, getting brought to court all the time for what they were doing. But many of the people who founded the industry were not used to operating according to the rules of law or trade organizations. Social justice was a priority for a few of them, as it is in any demographic, but certainly not all. And since only 30 years have passed since the industry was granted a clean and above-board slate for operations, many of the people who got into the industry early are still in charge. While porn has tried its best and often succeeded in keeping up with the pace of technology and rolling with the punches of distribution shifts, its ability to predict consumer trends and to market itself to keep up with the changing demographics of porn consumers' taboo desires may have fallen by the wayside in important ways. In lieu of coming up with innovative ideas about what consumers in the 21st century might want to see, it's often easiest to continue doing what has always worked, in the hopes that pornography can shape taste rather than catch up with it. And to some degree, it's successful. Most of us may not have considered interracial porn particularly as a normal fantasy until we saw it on every porn site we visited, and then we summarily normalized it in our brains. Jeez. Summarily normalized. It's not actually that hard to say. Whatever. But that isn't to say that things will stay as racist and uncomfortable for porn consumers who are, as they say, woke. A 2016 study by Make.com and Pornhub took a look at the online porn consuming habits of millennials, and were surprised to discover that 5 of the top 20 most searched for performers were not white, that 2 of the top 12 search terms were for ebony and black, and that young people who watch porn seem to be generally more open-minded about matters of diversity than their predecessors. As Kelsey Lawrence of Mike.com wrote, "What we like doesn't develop in a vacuum. Much like anything else, who we're attracted to is largely shaped by cultural context. As a new generation of porn consumers grows up in an ever more multi-ethnic, multiracial world, their tastes will develop along with those experiences. The industry still has a way to go to catch up with them, though." MakeLoveNotP founder Cindy Gallop told me in an interview once that porn as an industry has gotten so big it's gotten conventional, and it's tanking. The economic recession has driven massive fear and insecurity, and therefore even more tendency to revert to what is familiar and therefore supposedly safe, and just keep doing the same thing you've always been doing. I think this nail-on-the-head assessment of many of the evils that plague adult entertainment is particularly true of race relations. Interracial porn has always been a taboo market, so many producers simply keep on making it in the hopes that it will continue to be so, whether consumers agree with that assessment or not. Thus, little headway is made in changing the status quo, with the result that, while porn consumers may be less titillated by interracial scenes than they were 40 years ago, the money flowing down from the top of the porn industry continues to treat white women like princesses and black men like predators, and consumers continue to see interracial porn marketed as taboo. The thing is, it's not difficult to sell it that way. Alright, so that's the end of that chapter, which is really long, and my throat is really dry. But it is worth talking about. That stuff is important. Hang on. Because the thing about porn is that most people with internet connections watch porn. In some form or another. You know, everybody, like, there's lots of different, you know, niches. Ugh. Okay, my phone just gave me, like, a weird warning thing, so I'm probably gonna have to cut this off soon. So, hang on. What was it? I totally forgot what I was saying. Oh, okay. So here's the thing. Most people watch some kind of porn. Most people with internet connections watch some kind of porn or are involved, you know, some way in pornography. And, if what we are watching is racist, that gets into our heads. Like, when we are interacting with pornography, we're often at our most vulnerable. You know, we're not spending a whole lot of time thinking about racial justice issues when we're watching porn, most of us. And it's very easy to just kind of, you know, click around and take in what you find. And a lot of the time, what you find is saddled with really derogatory language. There can be things in scenes that we don't know are coming, like, you know, like violence, you know, or things that at least can look violent, terminology and name calling and kinds of things that we might not necessarily have signed up for, but which we end up taking in anyway. So as consumers, you know, the pay rates in the industry and these types of things may not seem to affect us a whole lot, but we are being exposed to these ideas, whether we consciously agree with them or not. And I do think that because when we're watching porn, like I said, we are in a very vulnerable state, some of that messaging can really get to us. And then obviously on the flip side, you know, the people who are doing this work, I've talked to a lot of people, like performers in the industry, who are people of color who, you know, might show up to their day on set, and a lot of the time, unless it's a feature film with like a script and, you know, costuming and the whole thing, a lot of the time people just show up for their day at work, not even necessarily knowing who they're going to be working with, but knowing like who's directing, or, you know, what the company is that they're working for. And they might show up, they might do their day's work, and it might be fine. They might have a great time, it might be a fantastic day at work. And then they're paid their day rate, and then they go home, and that's the end of it. And then what can happen is people take that footage, and it ends up in a movie with a horribly racist title, because they got paid for the work that they put in, but they didn't know what the name of the film was going to be. A lot of the time what'll happen is people will film just a whole bunch of scenes and then group them together and put them into a movie. And then the name of that movie ends up going up on the website, and then somebody pirates that movie and ends up applying their own terms to it. So if there was derogatory language in the title of the movie and in the names of the categories that get applied to that film, then the people who pirate it see all that derogatory language, and they will often go farther with it and use more derogatory language until, like, you end up in a situation where you have people going to Pornhub and they're like, oh, I want to see something with, you know, this type of person in it, and the words that they have available to them when they're in a heightened state of arousal and they're typing on their computer end up being like really not okay terms. that really can get into the way that you see the world. Like, your brain is an interconnected mass of cells, you know, things aren't isolated. So anyway, that's sort of my short explanation of like why this is important. It may seem like a niche topic to people who, you know, don't think about this stuff all the time, but I would venture to say that it's actually a very, very important topic, especially in times like these where people are being kind of blatantly racist on kind of a large scale. We need to talk about race issues more than we have for a while. Or, I mean, we've always needed to talk about it. That doesn't make any sense, Lynsey. We've always needed to talk about it, but right now is a particularly important time because it's an issue that is big. It's a big deal right now. Anyway, I'm missing some chat, so I'm going to scroll back, see what people says. Hunter Dillard says, is it really racism or a form of mental illness? I don't know exactly what you're referring to there. Lenny says, when it is only old, white, and males defining terms and value for any commodified market is really just the normal Western representational framework we POC see in, oh, sorry for my thumb, in every area of our lives. It ends up reducing distinct people and cultures into the generalized signifiers that reduce us into objects that can be invisible. Yes, that is absolutely the case. I don't have anything to add to that because it's like perfectly described. Yeah, it's you know, it's like the only cultural understanding that many Americans have of like cultural differences is the very tiny differentiations within white American culture. You know, like preppy people versus hippie people versus, you know, like outdoor sports people. And those are like these teeny tiny little differences, but because those are the differences that the people who are making most of the decisions at the top of almost any industry are exposed to in their daily lives, they expect that those are the differences between people. And so we all end up, you know, watching movies and in shopping situations where our choices are so limited that we become convinced that those are the choices. And meanwhile, there's this whole, you know, rich tapestry of other people and other cultures and other experiences that we just don't even get exposed to. And then those get recreated in our media over and over again, and porn is a form of media. So, yeah. Hunter says, is it the same as when someone pulls into your driveway and you peek through the blinds to see who it is? Hunter, I'm really sorry. I feel like you were asking really on-point questions for specific things that I was saying, but now I'm not saying them anymore, so I don't actually know what you're referring to. I'm really sorry. That seems like a really interesting question. I'm just not sure what it applied to. Lenny says, until they want to bring us up in search, this gives society a sense of control over us. You know, Lenny, that's a really interesting point. The search terms are fascinating. Search terms, and in porn, search terms and categories are very interesting. And I actually talk a lot about categorization in the next few chapters of the book, because it's like, this is the crux of people and capitalism and what happens when they're forced together. And it applies to like every part of culture. But porn is a really particularly interesting way of looking at it because it's so condensed. You know, it's like, here are people and differences between people. This beautiful tapestry that woven together creates humanity. Here are the ways that capitalism needs to break them down into searchable terms and categories that people can universally recognize. Let's smash them together in the grossest way possible. And that's what most porn websites are. So it is a fascinating bit of data that I don't think most people realize like the value of. Okay, anyway, edit, defensive or racist. Defensive or racist? I wonder what that means. Adrian says, yeah, the tags that often get used on those sites are very off-putting and also obscured where you won't see them as easily. Yeah, you often don't see the tags. You'll see like the categories that it gets labeled as, but a lot of the time you don't see the tags that are applied to it sort of behind the scenes, and that stuff can get gross. Hunter says, it completely boggles my mind how you can hate someone based on skin color. I can't fathom that. And Hunter says, I kind of missed what you were saying. All right, so Hunter and I kind of like, we're like ships passing in the night. We're like, hey, I think you're over there. Hey, oh no. Okay, Jael says, because there's a delay on live stream and it's hard for the streamer to keep up with chat, you sort of have to include the topic of what you're replying to in your comment. Yeah, I don't often see what goes on, especially when I'm reading, because I'm like trying to make some headway through the text, so I have to keep reading for a while at a time, and then I see chat way later and I'm like, I have no idea. I'm also not a very experienced live streamer, so some people are really good at like juggling multiple things while they're streaming, and I just am not. Lenny says, I feel like racism is seen as going hand in hand with hate, but that isn't always the case. Yes, I think that's really true. And again, I think that porn is a really interesting way of looking at that issue, because like it's like saying it's like a guy saying, oh, I don't hate women, I love women, I think they're beautiful. That sort of sentiment where like where it's not, you're not contradicting yourself necessarily, but you are reducing someone like from an actual human being who you could say that you respect, instead gets reduced to just being beautiful. I feel like in porn you have a lot of that, you know, like people could be like, I'm not racist, I love watching black men fuck white women. Well, you can still definitely be racist and still definitely enjoy watching that, because you're then reducing an entire person with thoughts and dreams and life experiences to literally one body part. So a lot of the time there's not any overt hate that goes into that. You know, there's not any necessarily like experienced feelings of hatred or disgust or any of that. A lot of the time it can be even like aspirational. For a lot of straight men who watch porn, part of it is like putting themselves in this person's shoes, or, you know, wanting to be sexually adventurous or proficient, you know, like this guy. So there actually can be this like kind of looking up to this person aspect of it, but that doesn't mean that you're not reducing that person to a stereotype, to a body part, you know, to a greatly concentrated idea of what this person represents in your mind. And that can be just as destructive as overtly hating someone, because it's a lot harder to catch yourself when you are reducing someone to stereotypes and to recognize that that's problematic than if you're like, oh, I hate this group of people, and then everyone around you is like, that's shitty, don't do that anymore. Like, it's a lot harder to get called out on fetishizing someone, because you're much less likely to come out in the open that you fetishize someone, I think. Which is kind of a... Oh, hang on. Oh, no. My phone is telling me that Facebook keeps stopping. I think my phone is having issues today. I'm gonna have to do some digging around. I hope that my stream isn't, like, stopping constantly. Adrian says it's reducing someone to almost where a person or group of people are fetishized. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's really the whole thing about groups of people in pornography, is the fetishization, which is a difficult word to say, and I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for saying it properly. Yeah, I think that there's really a lie that gets told in a lot of the minds of a lot of people when it comes to sexuality, and particularly porn, which is, I love these people, I like to watch them have sex. That does not make you exempt from being a racist. And because what we watch pornographically is not a typical topic of conversation, it's not something that many of us get like called out on. It's not something that we really learn how to recognize as an issue in ourselves. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem about like why I wrote this book. Like, pornography is a real part of our lives. Even people who don't watch it very often are still living in a culture where most of the people around them are watching porn. And So the issues that it brings up are very important. And because we don't talk about them, they fester, they grow, and they fester. And I think that porn is such a meeting place for capitalism and racism and all of these isms, you know, some of which are like overtly bad and some of which are not, and it's really complicated, but pornography, because of the nature of what it is, really boils all of these topics down into very simplified stories. And the boiling down of large ideas into smaller stories is difficult and complicated and often problematic, and particularly in porn, it's very problematic. Because it doesn't get examined, it doesn't get picked apart. There's not like a whole school of thought that's like porn theory. You know, you can't go to like college and like get a degree in porn theory, but you can in film theory. But porn is a type of film, you know? There are a few places out there that do offer courses on, you know, porn as media, and criticism and stuff, but they're very rare. And I think it's really important that people, you know, especially today, like have some literacy around pornography, for our own sexual safety and pleasure and just understanding, but also because it's important to examine the way that, you know, these issues get played out. JL says the stream hasn't stopped at all. Cool. Good to know. I keep getting random little things. It's like Facebook is stopping, or like you're running out of storage, and I'm like, it's been telling me that I've been running out of storage for like 2 weeks, and I keep deleting things and it keeps telling me that. I don't know. Adrian says, that's the damnedest thing about racism. It's so incredibly subtle that the average person won't even realize that something is problematic unless they're focusing on it. Yeah. Yeah. We're really raised in a, I don't know. We're raised in a really, really weird place when it comes to race. You know, America is a total mess. I keep just seeing these things where people are like lamenting that America's not as, you know, as positive as it used to be, and people here aren't as nice as they used to be, and like, oh, we're getting away from our American values. And I'm like, what values? Like, this country is based on genocide and slavery, and those are based on race. Like, and we've never really addressed that. We don't have the kind of discourse that is needed to like even attempt to heal those wounds. And so when people are like, we're getting away from our core American values, like, and you want to return to those? That sounds terrible. And I think that, I mean, porn is really like, and I've wrote this in the book, I've said it many times, but it's like a funhouse mirror version of the rest of society, because of that ability to take big issues and boil them down into really simplified stories that people think they can do whatever they want, because A, it's just porn. It's just made to get people off. You don't really have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. Just enjoy it and move along. It really gets away with a lot of things that other entertainment and non-entertainment industries could never do, because they would be called out for it and people would get mad. But people don't get mad about porn. Like, I mean, that kind of is changing. People are talking more about it and looking at it more carefully. But I do think that the porn industry is still really, it's like this crucible where like the rest of our culture ends up and is mostly ignored. But if you really like dig into it, it tells you so much about where we're at, you know, culturally. Lenny says the American dream, right? Yeah, like, I'm sorry if anyone out there is watching this and gets offended. I am very sorry that you haven't thought about this before, but I'm going to point out the fact that the phrase "Make America Great Again" is inherently racist and sexist and awful. Because if you want to make America great again, that means you want to go back to a time where the only people who had a voice in our culture were landowning white men. And if you think that makes us great, that's a problem. There's a lot that you're not looking at in your life. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. Getting away from that. Adrian says, as they used to be, meaning people didn't talk about things, so ignorance was confused for politeness. Yes, exactly, right? Right? Like, oh, things used to be great when like bad people didn't exist and bad things didn't happen to people because people were just better. No, there were just a lot more people living in silent suffering because they weren't allowed to talk about the bad things that happened to them. That's how I feel about that. Jail says, I think in response to Adrian's last comment, I feel like none of us are free of it regardless of how aware we may be. We're still living in the time we're in. It's still deep in our programming. Yeah, there we go. It's still deep in our programming. There's always more awareness to gain. That's true. Like, my constant struggle, which we have seen depicted multiple times during this stream, to say folks instead of guys, because I just got so used to saying guys as like a pan-gender thing. And then I realized that I have a bunch of non-binary friends and female-identified friends who don't like being called guys because that has a whole bunch of connotations. And so now I am trying to say folks, but it's just so... it's so naturalized and normalized in my brain that I get to say guys whenever I want and not offend anyone, and it to be not a problem. And I feel like there are so many layers of that in my head, and so many layers of that in so many of our heads. It's hard. It's hard to be aware and to keep digging through your own layers of privilege and prejudice, and it's not fun. But it's, you know, how you become a better person by trying to respect other people. That's my belief. Like, yeah, it might be a pain in the butt to have to change the way that you say things, you know? But if you're doing it because you're trying to respect other people, then what's the harm? Anyway. By the time I was done writing that, it was no longer Adrian's last comment I was responding to. Adrian says, precisely, there isn't a moment where it will suddenly be eradicated. We can grow and hope more people are willing to call it out and address it, but it will always be a work in progress. That is true, Adrian. And I definitely have seen people who like throw up their hands and like, oh, well, we're never gonna get there, so what's the point of trying? Like, I don't know. The point of trying is to try to be decent human beings, like, as much as we can. I mean, we're never gonna be perfect. We're never gonna get there, especially not like in our own lifetimes, you know? But that doesn't mean that you don't try. And I get it's hard. I get that we've all been raised in the same culture where we have certain values and certain patterns of language and certain patterns of thinking, and that changing them is hard. I do. I get it. As a white person, I definitely get that it is hard to change those things. But, you know, it's not as hard as, like, living as a disenfranchised group or, you know, like, being legitimately oppressed all the time. Like, I think I can handle trying to work on myself. It's the least I can fucking do, right? So, I actually wrote an article about race issues in porn for Glamour, glamour.com. I think it was the summer that this came out, so it was 2017. And it was interesting because I had just finished writing this book and I wrote this chapter. And the chapter was really, like, it's more of an exploration of some of the many issues that exist. It wasn't really a deep dive into any one thing in particular. And then, like, right after the book was released, I started working on this long-form article for Glamour where I was able to focus a little bit more on a few of the issues. So don't have the link available at the moment, but I will put it in the notes of this video when it goes up on YouTube and Facebook as like a video. So if anybody's interested in reading that, it digs a little bit deeper rather than being sort of like an overview of many of the issues involved. Adrian says, if nobody was willing to try, I'd have a lot harder time using the bathroom in public places. Hang on. I feel like there's a whole bunch of layers to that statement. I'm not sure which one I'm supposed to walk away with. So that's the chapter that focuses particularly on race. The next one is called Other Isms. Other Isms. And is going to be talking about, you know, like some sexism and homophobia and trans issues, things like that. And that will be in 2 weeks from now. Don't have a calendar in front of me, but I guess it's going to be on like the 13th or 14th of April. And that's going to be another difficult chapter where we're talking about a lot of big issues, but also important issues. So that's what's coming up next. It's actually really funny what I'm drinking out of this glass right now. I got this glass in Virginia City, Montana, when JL and I went to visit. It's a ghost town that has like an active town like behind it, so it's like a tourist trap. And when we went there, they were doing this thing called the Brewery Follies, and everyone was like, "Oh man, you gotta go! It's like live theater, and it's really funny, and it's like so great, and you're gonna love it so much." So we went, and it was like a sketch comedy evening of, you know, scripted sketches, and they were all racist and homophobic and nationalist and sexist, and it was like super fucking awkward. And basically what I did was I just got really drunk, because like the tickets were really expensive too, like, and so like we got to intermission and we were like, should we leave? Like, this is really uncomfortable. And I was like, we paid a lot for these tickets and we don't have anything else to do. Like, let's just get a whole lot more drinks during the second act. So we just got really drunk. And then at the end, we bought these cups. I don't know why we bought these cups. Like, we shouldn't have. Like, I really disapproved of the entire thing. But now we have 2 of these cups that have the Brewery Follies written on them. I don't know. Life is weird, you guys. I just did it again. I said, guys, I'm the worst. I should probably get some sort of like cat o' nine tails and start flagellating myself on stream. Yeah, Adrian, it was super awkward. Like, the people next to us left, and we probably should have, but I was like, no, maybe it's not that, like, maybe I'll give them another chance, it'll get better. I don't know. And it didn't. And then, like, at the end of the night, like, we were at the bar, and like the cast was also like helping clean up, and like one of the actors, he was really good, and so he came out and he was like, did you enjoy the show? And we were like, you did a really good job, which was kind of the best that we could do. and he gave us this look that was like, really? We were like, I'm so sorry, you should move away from here and come to Missoula where there's more arts things that you could get involved with. Anyway, okay, done with that. I want to make an announcement. For anybody who came in later and didn't see it at the beginning, here's my announcement. Boop. This is the first issue of what will eventually be 8 issues of Tracy Queen, which is a graphic novel that I wrote that I am super, super duper extremely proud of. It is about a young lady who starts off as a very repressed, very controlled, you know, just normal young woman, except she's also like an assassin and an enforcer for organized crime syndicate. And she starts in this issue, which has 36 pages of story, and guest art from other illustrators and a beautiful cover. She starts to make a journey from being repressed and sad and lonely to sort of discovering herself, particularly sexually, and she becomes a cam girl, an online cam model, and she loves it, and she starts to love her life and start to gain some independence, and begins her journey toward becoming sort of a warlord. She becomes the leader of this army that is fighting for love and sexual empowerment. So this is the beginning of that journey. Like I said, it's 36 pages of the story. We've got also 10 pages of amazing guest art by other amazing artists. The illustrations within the story are by JL Draco, who is in this chat right now. And the cover art is by Stevie Ray Drawn, an incredibly talented digital artist who made this beautiful cover. It's so pretty. I love it. And this book comes out tomorrow. It is going to be available starting on April 1st, 2019 on the Oneshi Press website store. And I'm terribly nervous because I've been working on this book for 7 years, and it is finally going to be available in part to the general public, and I really hope that people like it. And I kind of hope that some people hate it, because that's good, you know, when somebody like cares enough about something you did to hate it. that's good. and I'm scared and I'm excited, and tomorrow is the big day. So, oh wow, well thank you. I think it looks great too. I know, look at this cover. I don't want to like break the spine. This is actually a perfect bound. It has a spine, so I don't want to break it, but I'll give you a little peek at the full cover art. It is just so pretty. Oh, and we raised the money to make this happen on Kickstarter, and there's a whole page here in the back thanking all of our Kickstarter backers. So I feel really good about that. I mean, because it means that almost 200 people care about it enough to help us make it, which is badass. So those Kickstarter backers already have their copies. There are probably a few that are still in the mail to other countries. And these will be going out to our Patreon backers at Oneshi Press, which is the publishing company that published this. Those will be going out this coming week. And anybody else who wants a copy can go tomorrow to the Oneshi Press website and buy their copy there. And you can let me know what you think. I'm terrified and scared and excited and giddy, and I kind of want to puke. But I'm not going to, because instead of puking, I am going to actually like write a press release and some blog posts and a whole bunch of important things that have to go along with the launch. That's what I'm doing for the rest of the day today. So, thank you, Adrian. I am so nervous. I have always wanted to be a fiction writer, and I have thus avoided writing fiction for most of my life because I am really, really scared of failing at it because it's the one thing I want. So this is like my first real, I don't know. I mean, I've written other fiction things that have been out in the world. I've written some short stories that have been published. And I have also written the first few issues of Pack, which is a comic book series, also published by Oneshi Press, about vigilante dogs. But I am not also the original creator of Pack. I came in as a writer on the project later on in its development, so I don't feel sort of the same sense of ownership over that project. Also, like, Tracy Queen is pretty much my magnum opus on a lot of issues that are really important to me, like sexual empowerment, sex work, feminism generally, human rights, animal rights. Like, there's a lot that goes on in this book, and so I feel a lot of responsibility for it. I feel a lot of ownership over it, and I really want the world to like it. I'm not gonna puke. Adrian says, I am afraid of failing because it's the one thing I want. I felt that sentiment in my soul. I know, right? I definitely, like, since I was like 5 or 6 or something, I have known that I want to be a writer, and I know that for me that means writing fiction. And I have written and published nonfiction of many kinds, like this. I have written nonfiction journalism for literally Rolling Stone, and many other places that are big deal. And I have written and published poetry multiple times, and I have written and published scholarly papers. I mean, I've written like everything that you can write and published most of it, except for fiction, because I'm terrified that I will suck at writing fiction. And you know what the real bummer of that situation is? Because I'm afraid that I will suck at it, I don't do it as much, so I'm actually not as good at it because I don't have the amount of practice that I need at it. But graphic novel writing, interesting, because it is fiction. You're clearly writing fiction when you write a graphic novel, unless it's autobiographical or something. But it's not the same as writing prose fiction. So it's this whole other thing. Like, I feel like I'm still dancing around writing fiction, although I am writing fiction. It's like a whole different thing. But this is like, this is my dream. This is what I want to do. I want to write stories that are fictional, that sometimes maybe have talking animals and cyborg clone armies in them, because that's a thing that happens in fiction. And I think it's good. I hope. Anyway, curse you, fingers. Yeah, so I feel like many people who are creative can probably sympathize with not doing the thing that you want to do most because it is the scariest thing that you can do because you want to do it the most. So this is my attempt, my first attempt to overcome that fear. And I am really, like, actually so scared of it that I have put off doing like a press release, and I have put off coming up with interesting ways to celebrate the launch. I have nothing. I have nothing scheduled. I don't have a launch party going on. I don't have anything, because I think I actually kind of hope that it doesn't do well, because then the pressure's off. It's like, man, brains are complicated. We will do amazing things to keep ourselves from succeeding, because if we succeed, we can also fail. It's wild. Anyway, all right, I need to wrap up because I still actually need to do all of the work that I've been saying I need to do. And it's getting on in the day. So, my dears, my darlings, thank you so much for being here for this conversation that we had today. Chat was awesome. You guys were really into it, and that is badass. I will be back in 2 weeks to talk about primarily issues of trans representation, LGBTQIA+ representation, and like bodies of size and bodies with different levels of ability, which I put under the other isms category or title, chapter title. So I'm going to collect notes about where you can find out more about the people that were quoted in this past chapter, as well as some other resources that you can seek out. And I will put those in the notes of these videos for anybody who's interested in learning more about those. And I will see you back here in 2 weeks when I read my next chapter. So, everybody, have a great 2 weeks. I hope that you're having a wonderful spring if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, or a lovely fall if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. And that is going to be the end of my stream. So, bye everybody.